Hi everyone, and welcome to Wine 101 on the road here on Cable Access 13 TV, Prescott, Arizona, USA. I am Dan Strauss, your host for this episode. We have returned to Central California, and we are in the beautiful Edna Valley. We are here at Claiborne and Churchill Winery with winemaker Kobe Parker Garcia. Kobe, thank you for your time, much appreciated. It's great to be here.
It's good to have you guys. Thanks for coming out.
Why don't we start and find out a little bit about Kobe himself, maybe a little about the educational background, where he apprenticed or did his cellar rat time, and how he wound up right here on this property.
So I'm one of the few and fortunate to have been born and raised in San Luis Obispo. I never thought of myself to stay around the area and kind of grow my roots here, but things happened and I was fortunate enough to do so. So I actually am a graduate from Cal Poly San Luis Obispo, ag business major with a concentration in marketing and a minor in viticulture and wine studies. At Cal Poly, their philosophy or their motto is to learn by doing. So a lot of students, and myself included when I was a student, got an internship here at Claiborne and Churchill, and got credits to basically work harvest. So that's kind of where I got my feet wet in terms of really wanting to be on the winemaking side of things. So
Well, it's a fantastic opportunity for you guys. Not just the academic part of it, but the practicum. That's pivotal.
No, definitely, and I think that's one of the areas that separates Cal Poly from a lot of the other universities, where it's not just all about being book smart, it's actually applying your knowledge to whatever field you're studying or interested in.
Outstanding. Kobe, what varietals are grown right here on the property? And I understand you do source some. Would you explain that to our audience, please?
Yes, so Claiborne and Churchill, we are a winery that is focused on four main varietals: Riesling, Gewürztraminer, Pinot Gris, and Pinot Noir. The three whites that we do are definitely more on the dry side. They're more food-friendly wines. They're not the sweet Rieslings and sweet Gewürztraminers of the old time. So these are wines that are based off of the wines of the Alsace region. Food-friendly wines that are driven by acidity and great just floral components. On our property here, we're sitting on about a 5-acre property, or parcel I should say. Behind us we have our estate Riesling vineyard. It's called our Claiborne vineyard. We just picked this fruit about 3 days ago, almost a month and a half early compared to previous vintages. So we have two different clones out here. We have this first block right here is clone 17, which is a clone based off of the UC Davis. And then the back section of the vineyard is clone 49, which comes out of the University of Colmar, which is a wine institute or wine university in Alsace. And then over to our right, or our left, is our small Pinot Noir vineyard. We planted that in 2009. We have three different clones. We have clone 115, 667, and 777. So this is a new planting for us. Last year was our first harvest off of that vineyard, and we were able to fill a whopping 1 barrel. So our goal with that is to possibly do, maybe 3 to 4 barrel blend.
How long have those vines been in the ground? 4-ish?
The Pinot Noir was planted in 2009, so about, almost 5 years now.
Okay.
The estate Riesling behind us was planted in 2005. So
Understood.
we've got our first commercial harvest off of that in 2008, 2009.
Explain to our audience, if you will, the noble grapes of Alsace, and as I understand, that was a tremendous inspiration to Clay and Frederica, the owners.
Yeah, so Clay and Frederica were both teachers at the University of Michigan, and kind of, I wouldn't say got fed up with academia life, but really wanted something different out of life. So Clay actually came out to California for a business trip, and stumbled across the Central Coast here and really fell in love with not only the wines but the people. And I mean, let's get real. It gets old shoveling snow, so they came out here and they found, you know, just wonderful weather, great people, like I said. So they before that they moved out here and figured out what they wanted to do exactly as far as starting a winery. They took a trip over to Alsace, and they actually walked the Route Divine in sections and really fell in love with the four main noble white grapes of Alsace, which are Riesling, Gewürztraminer, Pinot Gris, Pinot Blanc, and Muscat. And all 5 of those varietals we work with here at the winery, and that is our main focus for our white wine program.
And that's a great lead into my next question. You guys do an Edelsvicker, and correct my pronunciation on that if I'm off. But this is an interesting blend. Explain to our audience what's in it, please.
So Edelsvicker, it would be if you were to go to some small restaurant or any kind of not pub but a wine bar in Alsace, and you wanted just to get a craft of the white table wine. It's a blend. So so the Edelsvicker is always a blend of the noble white grapes of Alsace. So for us, it changes a little bit from year to year, but it's always consists of Riesling, Gewürztraminer, Pinot Gris, Pinot Blanc, and Muscat. Not necessarily all 5 of those. For the first couple vintages of the Edelsvicker here for Claiborne and Churchill, it was a blend of Riesling and Gewürztraminer.
Understood.
And Edelsvicker was actually one of the original wines that we've been doing since 1983, besides Riesling and Gewürztraminer.
Gotcha. How does the climate here in this area affect the soil, and especially with our proximity to the ocean?
So a little history about the Edna Valley. The first vines were planted in the Edna Valley in about 1973. They planted anything from Cabernet to Chardonnay to probably a little bit of Zinfandel, Merlot, Riesling, Gewürztraminer. So they were really trying to figure out what grew well in this valley. So now they've really figured out that Chardonnay, Pinot Noir, aromatic whites like Albarino, Riesling. We have the largest Albarino planting in the Edna Valley outside of Spain.
Oh, indeed.
And you know, those type of varietals grow really well because where we're sitting, we're about 2.5 miles from Pismo Beach or the Pacific Ocean. So,
Gotcha.
The valley itself, we pride ourselves on being coastal. We bud break a lot earlier than most regions due to the fact that it maintains a constant temperature. It doesn't get too cold with the influence to the ocean, and we get extremely long growing seasons compared to a lot of areas due to that cool influence. The Edna Valley AVA is one of the more coastal AVAs in California. Most of the vineyards are within 5 miles of the Pacific Ocean.
Okay.
So we get this really nice, growing season. It averages, about 70 to 75 degrees year round. So we get really long growing season, great vine maturity or grape maturity, and creates these wines with great power, great finesse, and good acidity.
Kobe, talk about vine orientation and canopy management, please.
So I've been making wine here in the Edna Valley for about 14 years, and when I first started working with some of the vineyards, people weren't using quite the vertical shoot positioning. So as you can see, the fruit zone, which is the section just along the cordon,
yes,
about a foot off of the cordon, that's considered the fruit zone. We really like to open up that fruit zone. Since we are a coastal AVA, we do have to worry about rot, mildew, or the mildew pressure is extremely high here in comparison to a lot of AVAs due to the fact that we are close to the ocean. So we really want to open up that fruit zone and allow good air penetration and to be able to put a good spray on there, so to protect from rot and other viruses.
When you harvest, are you still harvesting by hand? Is machinery involved in any of the harvesting, either here at the areas that you source from, or a combination of both?
You know, that's a good question. We've done some trials lately, and we've found that with some of our Gewürztraminer that we get from up in Monterey County, that we prefer it to be machine harvest. It comes off a little bit cleaner, and it arrives at the winery a little bit sooner. As far as all the varietals here on the property and Pinot Noir and other varietals here in the Edna Valley, it's all hand harvested.
Understood.
Pinot Noir and Riesling, they're very thin-skinned varietals, and they're very fragile, so they don't do well with mechanical harvesting.
Right. How does this year's crop look, especially with the weather that we've had here?
I mean, this is a good vintage. It's a crazy vintage though, because we're on the 12th, 13th of September here.
Yes.
And we're about 85% done. So.
Oh my goodness.
And usually by this time we've just picked our Pinot Gris and a little bit of Pinot Noir. So we're pretty much on the tail end of harvests, so that everything more or less is about a month to a month and a half early.
Wow.
But the quality looks phenomenal. We're seeing great yields, good concentration, good color with the Pinot, good flavors at earlier bricks. So it's one of those vintages where we've actually been picking fruit at a lower ripeness level or a lower brick level, but we're achieving that full ripeness or the full flavor profile that we're looking for.
And that's how you adjust for the early season.
Yeah, well, this is kind of new to me as far as an early season goes. But talking to some of the old timers in the valley and in California, some of the best vintages in California have been early harvests.
Look forward to tasting it down the road, huh?
2014.
Are the vintages here consistent?
Yes, I would say overall they're consistent, except for 2010 and 2011.
Okay.
2010 and 2011 were two of the coolest growing seasons in California history. We really didn't have a summer for almost 2 years.
Wow.
But I would say like 2012 and 2013 have been pretty, and 14, I take that back. 14 is not normal just due to the early ripening. But 2012 and 2013 definitely more on that normal side of harvest goes, except for the fact that we have been in about a 4-year drought.
Right. Talk to us about how Claiborne and Churchill approaches sustainability and the environment, please.
So at Claiborne and Churchill, we'll get a chance to go into the cellar / winery tasting room. But the winery itself has been sustainable, has been as you call LEED friendly, or since 1994. The winery itself was a straw bale building, so we don't use any air conditioning or any kind of forced cooling to keep the temperature at a constant temperature.
Wow.
So due to the fact that the straw bale walls are about 1.5 feet thick, we maintain about a 55 to 60 degree cellar temperature. As far as the vineyards that we work with, I would say about 75-80% of all of our vineyards that we work with are SIP certified, which means sustainable in practice. Good. Basically, sustainable in practice takes the motto of organic farming to a whole new level. We're using the same practices that you would do with organic farming. The big difference between SIP certification and organic farming is we also care about who's working the vineyards, how they're treated, what are they getting out of the vineyards. We also have to track our water use. We have to track our energy use. There's about a 10 or 12 chapter book that we have to follow specific guidelines, where we're audited on a yearly basis to maintain that SIP certification.
Well, that's fantastic. We're now going to move from the vineyard into the winery proper. See you in a few. We are back at Claiborne and Churchill Winery, in the winery and the tasting room proper, with winemaker Kobe Parker Garcia. Kobe, tell us what goes on exactly in the winery. Just take us through the process briefly, if you would, please.
So we were talking out in the vineyard. We work pretty close, or we work very close, I should say, with all the vineyards that we source or work with, or lease the vineyards here on the Central Coast. We work with vineyards from Monterey County down to Santa Barbara County. So we're a true Central Coast winery. I always tell people about 80% of all the winemaking is done out in the vineyard, 20% is done out here in the cellar. So it's pretty much impossible to make high quality wine with low quality fruit. So if you're given good quality fruit, your chances are you're going to make high quality wine. So basically all the fruit comes here to the winery. Everything's processed here on site. For our whites, we do a whole cluster press, so we don't destem anything. Everything goes directly into the press. It's pressed off and pumped into a cold tank where it settles for a couple days. And then after that, depending on what variety it is, it gets pumped either into a tank, another tank, or a barrel. We do a lot of neutral barrel fermentation on our whites. So,
Gotcha.
Very old tradition as far as winemaking goes. So most of our wines are not just fermented in stainless steel tanks. So we do a combination of stainless steel tanks and neutral barrels on,
Gotcha.
on the majority, if not all, of our whites.
Talk to us, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Please, excuse me. Talk to us a little bit about the types of barrels you use and the various toast levels depending upon the varietal, please.
So since we are a very, I would say, French-driven winery as far as varietals go, and a very European style winery, we deal with pretty much 100% French oak. We don't use any American oak at all. Just because we don't do Bordeaux varietals, we don't do Zinfandel, we don't do the heavier reds, which some of those American oak kind of impact the wine a little bit too much. My philosophy personally is to have the oak not impact the wine, but to elevate the fruit profile, or to elevate the wine, to kind of give it a little bit of a push or a little bit of a backbone,
Gotcha.
rather to impact it, which sometimes heavier toast levels can do. So I'm a firm believer of medium toast. We work with 5 or 6 coopers in France, and we do probably across the board on our Pinot Noir, we do anywhere from 30 to 40% new French oak. So we're not a very heavily impacted oak-driven winery, especially with the style that we're doing. We're more of an elegant Pinot Noir rather than this big, bold, heavy extracted Pinot.
Good.
A true Pinot Noir, I should say.
Perfect. Talk to us a little bit about how you approach the yeasts in the fermentation process, that is cultured versus native, please.
That's funny because my assistant, this is his it's probably more like his 5th harvest. He reminds me a lot of what I was like 10 years ago, where it was all about cultured yeast, and adding, a specific yeast to a specific varietal. I think as you get older and as you make more wine, you kind of roll the dice and let things go natural. And so I've kind of come to this realization, I guess, in my career, where native fermentation doesn't bother me. Especially with red wines. So the last 2 or 3 years, all of our Syrah's been 100% native ferment.
Outstanding. Good.
About 1/3 of all of our Pinot Noir is native ferment. And then for all of our whites, I do inoculate with a specific yeast.
Understood.
Just because if we are fermenting at cold temperatures, I want to make sure that that wine ferments completely through, and that we're not making sweet Gewürztraminer and sweet Rieslings.
Understood.
And then also I use specific yeasts for our barrel fermentation program. Certain yeasts work better, in my opinion, in the barrel fermentation program than in the tank fermentation program. So we work with, I work with probably up to about 10 different yeasts every year.
Okay. In terms of the final decision for the blends especially, is that yours solely, or are there other people involved in the decision-making process?
I mean, it does come down to me, and but you know, the owner, Clay and Frederica, are very much involved in that blend. I make sure that they're happy with the blend.
Sure.
Since their name's on the label,
Absolutely.
it doesn't say Kobe Parker Garcia. It says Claiborne and Churchill. So, no, and for me, you know, I think I have a good palate. I've been doing this for a while. I really try and get a woman's perspective too. So some of the gals that either work in the tasting room or that are our sales and marketing person or gal, I really try and get their feedback because I think women's tastes are a little bit more sensitive to men's. So if you can get a good discussion or a good group of people together to discuss the blend, maybe there's 5 different blends in front of you, and some people like blend number 2 and some people like blend number 3. So then I'll kind of go back to the drawing board and do it again, and then once it's unanimous and everyone's like, hey, I really like that number 3 blend, we'll roll with it.
There you go. You just partially answered my next question, which is your style of winemaking. What about a vision for your wines down the road?
I think for Claiborne and Churchill, you're gonna get quality wines. You're gonna get wines that taste good now but will age. I think with the Rieslings and Gewürztraminers and Pinot Gris, especially, these wines really start coming into their own about 4 years in bottle.
Oh, indeed.
So, they don't have quite that fresh and fruity characteristic, but they get more of a kind of a vineyard place of the terroir, of the soil, of the climate of the vineyard. So, and then with the Pinot Noirs, same thing. Our Pinot Noirs, we do 3 or 4 different Pinot Noirs every year. Some are meant to be drinking a little bit earlier than others, but some of our vineyard designate or our barrel selects, they'll age for a good 10 to 12 years, no problem. So I think you'll find wines that, due to the fact that we pick a little bit earlier than most wineries,
I see.
So we pick fresh fruit, acid-driven wines, and that helps a lot with the aging process, especially acidity, and a good not a good amount of tannin, but enough tannin to give the wines body.
Understood. Looking at the bottles in front of us leads me to my next question. Do you use traditional corks? Do you use screw caps, and why?
So I did back in 2007. I did a little trial with a few of our wines, cork versus screw cap, and partly because the owners weren't 100% sold on screw cap.
I see.
And partly because I didn't want to put all my eggs in one basket and just do screw cap and then have it come bite me in the behind.
Smart man.
So we found that with the screw cap, you get less variation, less bottle variation than you do with natural corks, synthetic corks, any other kind of corks. Cost-wise, it's a little bit more. It's a little bit cheaper to use screw cap than it is to use cork, because with the screw cap, you're just buying the screw cap. With the cork, you're buying the foil and you're buying the cork. So the combination of those two is more expensive than the actual screw cap.
I see.
We've been doing this since 2008. All of our wines under screw cap in 2008 are still spot on.
Outstanding.
They're still holding well. With all of our reds, it's pretty much all cork, all natural cork, good quality corks, and I think people are not quite there yet when it comes to paying $30, $40, $50 for a bottle of red wine and having it under screw cap. They still like to hear the pop of the cork.
Interesting. Our Prescott audience, Kobe, has a lot of foodies, and one question we like to ask as we meet winemakers like you is, what is your favorite varietal and what would you pair it with? So what say you?
So these are our main wines that we produce that we're probably most known for. There are others. I'm sorry that the other children didn't make it here, but I'll just go through the wines here, which are my kind of go-to pairings. Gewürztraminer in German means spicy. So anything spicy, Thai food, Asian food, Indian food, wonderful. Also, don't forget to put this at the table with Thanksgiving. Cranberry, smoked meats, wonderful. Wonderful wine to have with spicy food. Riesling, everybody talks about Chardonnay and Crab. No. Riesling and Crab is the go-to. Definitely the go-to. Shellfish, seafood, must. Pinot Gris. Our Pinot Gris is not the traditional, or I shouldn't say that, like the Italian Pinot Grigio. This is a very rich Pinot Gris, so it pairs really well with richer sauces.
Okay.
You can do some sort of like almost like an Alfredo sauce. It holds up really well. I enjoy this with chicken. You can also do that with seafood as well, like a richer seafood dish. The Edelsviker is kind of I would call it almost like a porch pounder. It's it's a good summertime afternoon wine. It goes great with cheeses. I should say all these wines go good with cheeses. And then lastly, Pinot Noir. I love Pinot Noir and lamb. That's probably my favorite. Pinot Noir, some of the lighter style Pinot Noirs, they go really good with salmon. Or any kind of any kind of meats that are a little bit gamey. I think Pinot Noir holds up well with.
I see. I see. You're making me very hungry.
Yes, yeah.
Well, it's been a great visit here at Claiborne and Churchill with Kobe. We want to thank you. We want to thank Clay, Frederica, for your most gracious hospitality. Do come visit these guys. They're great. The wines are great. That's it for this episode. On behalf of Wine 101, see you down the road.
Cheers.